Hello, creative people. Thanks for tuning into Melody or Witchcraft. I'm your host, Catherine Petrocelli. On the podcast, we hear a poet read a work of their own and an Emily Dickinson poem of their choosing that contributed to their work. We discuss poetry, Dickinson, the fluidity of time, and the scope and sources of creative inspiration. The past is such a curious creature, Dickinson wrote. Join us to find out how it can teach us about our now.
How dreary to be so.
A little madness in the spring is wholesome, even for the king. But God be with the clown who ponders this tremendous scene, this whole experiment of green, as if it were his own.
That was Dr. Barbara Mossberg reading Emily Dickinson. Dr. Barbara Mossberg has led an Emily Dickinson-infused life for 77 years, writing poetry since age 6 in the now-burned Altadena, California foothills, and publishing poetry and criticism since age 12. Her first book was Emily Dickinson When a Writer is a Daughter, 1982, named by Choice as Outstanding Academic Book of the Year. In 1986, she co-founded the Emily Dickinson International Society when she was serving in a federal appointment as U.S. Scholar in Residence for USIA, American Studies Specialist. As a dramatist and actor, she has written Flying with Emily Dickinson, about her career of lecturing on Dickinson in over 25 countries as a Fulbrighter and cultural diplomat. California laureate and poet in residence for Pacific Grove, California, and author of 2 recent books of memoir poetry, one organized around Emily Dickinson. She is professor of practice in environmental humanities, Clark Honors College, University of Oregon. Barbara, hi.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
I'm so honored.
So we have the clown.
Yeah,
Tell us your relationship with the clown, which is deep.
My relationship with the clown is deep. We think of clown as not being serious and really actually being disrespectful to the gravity and the reverent aspects of life. And yet the clown historically has been a revered figure. In Shakespeare, the clown speaks truth to power and is given very important lines as sort of the provident wisdom. And I think of Dante's Divine Comedy, and the book that I ended up writing recently is called Clown Cantos. So it's literally the cantos of Dante, dividing up sections of poems with the voice of the clown, specifically Emily Dickinson's voice of the clown, who's not arrogant, who's humble, and is taking seriously what there is to take seriously, who's pondering. And how is the scene described? It's this great word, this vulnerable word of the poet, because it's so large, this tremendous scene. This is from somebody who picks words very carefully and in a New England way does not overstate. This is a tremendous scene. And then it's the whole, this cosmic vision. And it's this experiment. And if you say experiment, that means you don't know. You don't know how it's going to turn out. This is nature. This is the universe happening around us. And it means it's not over. It's not done. It's still new and unknown and to be discovered. This whole experiment of green, this color of resurrection and new life, improbable life. After darkness and trauma, there's green. So amazing. Yeah. And he looks at the earth as if it were his own. So he doesn't own it, doesn't presume. but as if it were his own, that he has such a profound connection to it, like his own relations, his own kin. And so to me, that clown that I try to represent and honor in my poetry with this vision of Emily Dickinson, it's to look at this world, to behold it as amazing, as wondrous and comic, in the grand way of comic, of a happy ending, of communion, of unity.
I mean, I think what you're saying is so many pieces of who I feel Emily is in, so many tributaries we could take. Yes, the experiment. I mean, so many people of her time were writing with such conviction, right? They're declarative sentences. And she is writing the question. She is wondering. She's dwelling in possibility.
I love
And so the experiment, rings so true. And then obviously her reverence for nature. And her stepping aside from religious doctrine as well. So pushed in her time. In favor of the altar of nature. And so,
And she has this authority to know whose side God's on. The king might be the legal owner of the land, right? But she knows.
Just sort of leaning into the clown and the joy of the clown as well, I feel like it's super important to debunk this traditional vision of Emily Dickinson as the morose, death-obsessed poet. And I think it's so important, in particular, for her and who she is and who she can be for us. But I also think it's very important because we need to be able to challenge what we think we know. And when we're introduced to something else, new information, additional information, different information, whether that's about now or about the past, how does that change what we believe? And can we allow it to change what we already believe?
I love that.
This is the poet that wrote, "To be alive is power." Right? So I mean, I don't have to preach to you, of course. But
preach to me.
It's one of my very hot button things about Dickinson, where when people just want me so desperately to admit that she was depressed, that she was, maybe it was because she never got married, and they're not reading the poems of joy.
That's it. They're not seeing it, and it's one more time where she's not being seen. I think for me, probably her anthem poem is "I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? Then there's a pair of us. Don't tell." My students love that, and everywhere around the world that I have been, people have loved it and recited it in all these different languages. It just hits a universal chord that we may all experience ourselves basically as unknown and not being seen, because people have an idea of who we are based on how we look, based on how we sound, based on what they think they know about us. And we don't feel that that's who we are. And so then we open up this magic mirror, this poetry by Emily Dickinson, and we see ourselves, and she draws us in and makes us understand how we are seen. And so she is, in this way, she is the seer and the seer.
I love that poem maybe reflects herself as unseen, and by sharing that with us, we are seen. She breaks the cycle, you might say.
Yes. And now we're all together. We're all hunched together, all the nobodies, right? Also, I think it's a liberating idea, because in her case especially, if she's not seen, then she can do her experiment. She's free. And there's so much a theme of secrecy, and suspense, and your own homage to this witchcraft and melody, that she can do that with this cloak of invisibility, really this mythic aspect. transformational aspect of herself of, you quoted to be alive is power. It is a powerful mantle of invisibility, of nobodiness.
That's right. Yeah, she's just a woman. She's just she's just in the corner. She's not saying anything of importance.
Right.
Therefore, she can say anything she wants.
Yeah.
Well, since it's so brief, I actually feel like maybe if you wouldn't mind just reciting the clown again so we can kind of have that. And then maybe you could just introduce for us how you came to center a whole book around this and just introduce us to your poem that you brought today.
Okay. A little madness in the spring is wholesome, even for the king. But God be with the clown who ponders this tremendous scene, this whole experiment of green, as if it were his own. God be with the clown. So I think in terms of the book that I wrote on this, it's this idea, I think, of sanctioned, exuberant amazement at a world that's still happening. And the subtitle of my book is Everything is Alive in Its Own Way, Singing. So the title combines Emily Dickinson and Dante, clown cantos. The subtitle combines Ian Shillog, his Radiotopia program, Everything is Alive, which my son brought me to. And he interviews inanimate objects, and we develop great love and empathy for them in these podcasts. So everything is alive. And Nicolino told me, my son, that if he died, he said, I will still be alive, just differently. And then Dolly Parton, who sings, Everything is beautiful in its own way. Everything is alive in its own way, singing from Emerson. And he said that objects must be sung and sing themselves. And so what I do in my book is I take objects, people, my mother, who doesn't believe she's dead, rocks, trees, mountains, fish in the restaurant, pond, every kind of object, spider, everything that I encounter, most of which are considered dead or done for or not consequential or not worth seeing. I have many pests featured, and these are all lyric, I would say flash memoir. They're 1 to 2 pages of my encounters with them, which start out being problematic and end up with a resolution that sees the green in them, that sees the possibility, as you quoted, I dwell in possibility, that sees the tremendousness and non-endingness of it. And so from that point of view, they are the voice of the clown. And I could read one that starts out with a problem and ends sort of transcendentally, but that's really, I think, the structure where they all go. Should I read one? Okay. It's a very interesting poem because I think I've worked on it for 50 years. I worked on it when I was doing my research on Emily Dickinson at Harvard's Houghton Library. And I went to the Peabody Museum for a break, the Peabody Museum of Natural History. I'll tell you how I started and how I think that this morning, thinking about Emily Dickinson, I don't know, but I changed it. So it was originally, I don't know what I expected in this Museum of Natural History, pterodactyl bound in concrete, a city block of bone beams, tethered and classified, shutter wings, whence it flew. Inside, the walls are soiled above the handrails, banisters oiled by grasping palms, stairwells smelling of sweating feet. Two giggling boys cuff each other on the landing. now grounded with mementos, animal antiques, stuffed buffalo, mangy remnants of the Ice Age. From continent to continent, in canoes, on sailboats, on rafts, we trudge through our history. 500 years in a room, and we ascend the stairs, winding and winding, room after room, always to meet the same eyes of the hunter, skins of the hunted remains. The clutter brings me down. Baskets, thousands of years of them, brown triangles, some poor lady's time, oh, her time, in stifling caves on the cliffs, on the ice, confining plains, fringed leather, dead rabbits. No, no, none of this was real. I deny a history of skeletons. I don't have bones, no spine, no relic to say if you live, you die. There are artifacts, but I own a private evolution. Natural history does not include my plans to fly. This is my time now, my baskets, my mysterious flesh. So that was the original. And I think probably you read a version of that. Every time that I've read it, I have changed it. And I think it's because it wasn't done yet. And what you've made me realize from this poem that we focused on today about an experiment is that a poem is a living expression of being. It's an existential entity of a kind of a life, and it is not finished. It's every time we look at it, new life begins.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like, what we were saying about how you would have to change what you think when you're learning new information. And I was just having this conversation with my kids actually about colors and how you look at a color and then you hold up another color next to it and then the color looks different. And if you hold a third color, and they continue to change depending on what's next to them. And I feel like that's related to maybe the changing poem and the life experiences that are creating it and moving it to the next version and the next version. We're very uncomfortable with that, aren't we, as a society?
Yes, we are. We are. It's so interesting. We sort of live in this quantum world of what is fact and what we know and what is knowledge, and what's unassailable, what is truth. And then there's what is not known and the questions. And we live in this sort of quantum generative tension between these. And Emily Dickinson, I think, of all the writers that I know, she balances and puts into focus the question, the experiment, the reverence of what is not known, what is yet to be known. Because if we don't know it, in a way, it isn't dead. There's still hope.
Yeah, I love the rebel voice in this poem, in your natural history poem. I mean, it's Dickinson's rebel voice, too. It's kind of, if we're wandering through a museum, a natural history museum, whatever kind of museum, we're looking, we're taking it in. How are we supposed to take it in? Well, it's reverence. It's there. It's important if it's there, isn't it? And this rejection of, no, this does not reflect me. This isn't me. It's so enticing. The mysterious flesh.
Oh, I love that.
I mean, those baskets. I mean, how many baskets have we seen in how many museums?
I know, right?
What you say of them, brown triangles, some poor lady's time. Oh, time.
Yeah, exactly. That's where the poem sort of, it just stops. It's like, now we're seeing the lady, finally emergent, the lady, how she spent her time in this museum. So here's the one that I feel is much more Dickinson-esque. It is debuting here in the world stage of melody or witchcraft. So it's called now Don't Have Bones, written at the Peabody Museum of Natural History. Death. I don't know what I expected in this Museum of Natural History. What is natural history? A city block of bones, mementos, mortal antiques, stuffed buffalo, mangy remnants. Continent to continent, canoes, sailboats, rafts, we row through sediment, our remains. Winding and winding, room after room, always to meet the same doom, the roar of the eyes of the hunter, silence of skins, death's clutter. I could drown in baskets, bins, thousands of years of clusters of brown triangles, some poor lady's time, oh, her time, the screeching of gulls, stifling caves on the cliffs, on the ice, confining plains, what is left, rubbish. No, no, none of this was real. I deny a history of skeletons. I don't have bones, no spine that says, if you live, you die. There are artifacts, but I own a private evolution. Natural history does not include my plans to fly. Natural history does not tell my story, my time now, the glory of my baskets, my mysterious flesh.
Thank you. That's lovely. And was struck as you were reading, after that poor lady's time, the screeching of gulls.
Yeah.
So it's as if to break the silence.
Yes.
The gulls swoop in.
When I was revising it, where I was right then was so claustrophobic that is what this immersion, this encounter with natural history and all this accumulation of death's artifacts. And I just felt claustrophobic. She's in this cave and it's hot. And then there's the screeching of gulls, just the kind of violence, the roar of the eyes of the hunter, skins. Each silent skin, something was brought to a shrieking halt. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I am grateful for the poet's eye on this scene that we have encountered, I'm sure, dozens of times, all of us, and to, see it again, see it alive. I have a question for you about being a cultural diplomat. I loved that phrase in your bio.
Yeah.
And since you mentioned in your bio 2 recent memoir poetry books, so we have personal memory.
Yes.
And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how that meets this idea of cultural memory, or being, as you coined it, a cultural diplomat. Because I'm very interested in what we bring forward, right? Time. In our work, that's sort of the larger theme. What would you say about memoir in our personal lives and in our cultures?
Memoir is headline news in our culture today. Our best-selling books are all memoir. If you go into the bookstore, every other book's a memoir. Unlike journals or autobiography, a memoir is artfully constructed of some moment that is captured. It could be a life, it could be a weekend, it could be an epiphany. That's a memoir. And I think the way that it works for our culture, and in this way that you're defining this for us, it's very significant, your shaping of this, that memoir serves us in the way that Ralph Waldo Emerson said, if you go into the most private, secret, deepest part of your own story, you will speak most universally for the man in the street and the maid with the pail. And that paradox, that by telling your story, by making something of it, by really pondering what its meaning is, you're providing people like Emily Dickinson's I'm Nobody. You're providing people a way to understand their own lives and maybe to find the love, the forgiveness in these stories, the understanding that could be developed when you see that you're not alone. So memoir, I think, plays a very important role for community, for the way a culture understands itself. I think my poems are sort of recognizing and reckoning with my experience in my culture. So I'm, in this sense, an ambassador of the nation of me, right? Of my experience. And in that way, when I'm speaking and representing America as a country, traveling and wanting to extend understanding and learning and friendship and communion with others globally, what I bring are the voices of our writers. In the 80s, when I was being the official scholar in residence for USIA, telling America's story, I carried 2 books with me. One was Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, and one was Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. But I also carried within me the poetry of Emily Dickinson. And I found myself, whenever I spoke, leading with Emily Dickinson, concluding with Emily Dickinson, and talking about Emily Dickinson. But in representing the U.S., it was with writers' voices, what Toni Morrison experienced growing up in Lorain, Ohio, what Ralph Ellison experienced in his life and how he became an expatriate. So that's the intersection, I think.
What would you say to somebody who was just starting out writing, for example? I'm not going to say someone young, because you can start writing at any age.
Yeah.
So just someone who's maybe newer to writing, what would you say to them about literary ancestors? Are they important to be aware of? Is it simply an inheritance that follows us regardless, and you're doing what you're doing and it's somewhere cellular? Is it important to seek out the ones you connect with? Is it important to seek out the ones that are hard for you to connect with? How would you describe the importance of a literary ancestor?
Well, I think probably the impulse to write comes from reading. So when it gets to a tipping point, you've read this and you've read this, it's on your brain. And now it's part of how you experience the world. I think at some point, then you would say, well, I can write. And when you sit down and you pick up that pencil, all of the writing that you have read is what informs that moment, that you are writing in communion with this community, as you described, our ancestry, our literary ancestors. My advice would be your self-consciousness as a writer to read what interests you, read what challenges you, and write. And I often give prompts. I'll give somebody something by Hemingway, something by Gertrude Stein, something by Pablo Neruda, something by Rumi, definitely Emily Dickinson. First, I ask them, tell us how the sun rises. They might say, well, I didn't see it, I overslept. But whatever they're going to say, I say, okay, make a poem. No form, I don't give anything like that, just make a poem. Okay, now read this by Gertrude Stein and write that in this voice. Now read this by Emily Dickinson and write it in this voice. Now read this by Hemingway. Then they see within them the possibilities of using form and how they could say something and how they could usefully engage with literary ancestors and find their own voice.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Well, I feel like I've always played with, as a teacher, for example, different formulas that dance around that. But now I'm just going to use yours. So there are teaching ancestors too. I do want to ask a little bit about this joy and this effusiveness that you assign to Emily Dickinson, and that I feel like comes through just vibrantly from your own being and from who you are and how you express yourself. I have maybe a question that I hope doesn't offend, but I guess I'm thinking about how you've channeled all of your work in the world of academia, and was that challenging in terms of maintaining that effusiveness and that joy, maintaining it and also shaping it, I guess, into classroom worlds and lecture worlds? And is that a strange question? I don't know. I'm just fascinated by the kind of loveliness of you. And I'm not insinuating that the Academy is not lovely, but but it has its form as every
Yes,
entity, cultural structure might have. It
yes,
has a form.
yes.
So what to do with that overflow and that
Mm,
excitement in the face of the academic paper or the meeting with colleagues? Or
yes,
how
yes.
has it worked for you? How have you channeled it?
Well, I think it's probably key to my resilience, right? Because my career has been a lot of changes, going from a professor and then a dean and a Fulbright scholar and then a federal appointment. And then I was at the American Council on Education as a senior fellow, and I became president of a college and dealing with a board and lawyers and all of this. And I was like Odysseus, I was always wanting to go back to Ithaca, to be in the classroom one on one, really talking about literature again. And for a while, I stopped writing poetry. So I began to introduce my own love of poetry, of reading it and writing it into my actual leadership practice and cultural diplomatic practice. I remember reading from my journal to the board, and in my papers and all of this, I quoted Emily Dickinson, and I think I decided that this was integral to who I am as a problem solver and a strategist, resolving conflict and envisioning and getting people to work together and just whatever it was I was trying to do. And in the classroom, inspiring learning, which is such great vulnerability. I mean, you're sort of sowing chaos and you're asking people to trust you with their precious sense of self and learner, of not knowing. How do you do that? I think I've led with joy, my own joy. That's protected me because it's true. So that's a strength. And I think for students, it comes across. I mean, the one thing they say is this professor has so much joy, has so much exuberance and everything else. And then it says, what about clear instructions and organized? No, no. They can't see that they're the same thing, no matter what I do. But it's going back to the clown. If you act exuberantly, just so enthusiastically, there's a little bit like,
I think there's a mistrust.
yes, it's not academic.
Yeah.
So then I have people look up the definition of academic. And I said, what's the definition of academic? They said, well, what we're doing here in school. You look it up, and yes, that is the first definition pertaining to school education things. Look at definitions 2, 3, and 4. And it says scholarly but not interested in the real world, not directly useful, not of no practical knowledge. And you could look at any dictionary and you're going to find this really pejorative. And I say, we have to change that in this classroom. We have to challenge that definition. And we have to show that academic is actually relevant and directly useful and concerned with the real world. What would really be relevant to people in an academic learning and what we have to teach? Well, questions. And they're not knowing. And how do you endure that? How do you bear that? How do you work through that? Because it's that's going to take you to the light. I really, really appreciate the space and the platform that you give to people and how you've made your own life and your energies. Oh, her time, her time. You've really organized that around this program and honoring Emily Dickinson and making her relevant to our world. And I feel that Dickinson's relevance to us is really important. This little lady in her upstairs bedroom, that because she wrote about herself in such true ways, that it's really important for us in our own journeys to know what she had to say. It's a profound, gift. And as we said earlier, poetry can show you that you're not alone, that you're seen, that you're loved, that you're forgiven, and how to live, and how to forgive, and how to bear existence and pain and unknowing. And this seems to me directly useful and needed in these days when we question the humanities and liberal arts, and are they needed? And probably the most practical, essential knowledge is what poets and Emily Dickinson have to say to us. We need this to live and to survive and to want to.
Dr. Barbara Mossberg, thank you so much for giving your time to the podcast.
I'm so honored, and it is a joy. It is a joy to engage with you and to see the world with you through your eyes. Thank you.
Thanks for being with us today for Melody or Witchcraft. You can find out more about today's guest by going to barbaramossberg.com. And she has invited you as well to write to her if you wish at barbara.mossberg@gmail.com.
Yay.
Our theme music is by Emma Wallace. The podcast is available on all the usual platforms, and for more information, join the Ask the Poet Substack, where you can find the show notes from today's show. Please comment, like, restack, recommend. We'd love to hear from you.